Cyber Threat Brief for April 15, 2026. Microsoft patched 167 vulnerabilities, including an actively exploited SharePoint spoofing flaw. CVE 2026-32201. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, KEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. Deadline April 28. And a publicly disclosed Defender Privilege Escalation, bug, CVE 2026-33825, Blue Hammer exploit. 8 critical flaws include a 9.8 CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, remote code execution in Windows IKE, CVE 2026-33824, and multiple Office remote code execution vulnerabilities exploitable via preview pane. Ransomware gangs 0apt and Crybit are fighting each other, and a watering hole attack compromised CPUID.com to deliver signed malware for 19 hours. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Cybersecurity Brief. April 15, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. Microsoft SharePoint Server Spoofing Vulnerability, CVE 2026-32201. Microsoft patched an actively exploited SharePoint Server spoofing vulnerability with a CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, score of 6.5. The flaw stems from improper input validation, allowing unauthenticated attackers to view sensitive information and modify disclosed data over a network. Attack complexity is low and requires no user interaction. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, added this to the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog with a federal remediation deadline of April 28, 2026. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates immediately for all SharePoint server deployments. This is under active exploitation. CISA KEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, deadline April 28. Sources: The Hacker News, Bleeping Computer, CISA Krebs on Security, CrowdStrike, Cyberscoop, The Register. Microsoft Defender Elevation of Privilege, CVE 2026-33825, Blue Hammer, a publicly disclosed privilege escalation flaw in Microsoft Defender, allows local attackers with low privileges to gain system access. The vulnerability has a CVSS score of 7.8 and exploits insufficient granularity of access control. Proof of concept exploit code was published on GitHub on April 2 by a researcher frustrated with Microsoft's disclosure process. Attack complexity is low and requires no user interaction. Microsoft classifies exploitation as more likely. Action: update Microsoft Defender to anti-malware platform version 4.18.26050.3011 or later. Updates install automatically by default. Manual update: Windows Security Virus and Threat Protection updates check for updates. Proof of concept exploit code is public. Sources: The Hacker News, Bleeping Computer, Krebs on Security, CrowdStrike, Cyberscoop, The Register, Sans ISC. Windows Internet Key Exchange Remote Code Execution, CVE 2026-33824. Microsoft patched a critical remote code execution vulnerability in Windows IKE service extensions with a CVSS score of 9.8. The double free vulnerability allows unauthenticated remote attackers to execute arbitrary code by sending specially crafted packets to Windows machines with IKE version 2 enabled. No user interaction is required and attack complexity is low. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates for all Windows systems. If immediate patching is not possible, block inbound traffic on UDP ports 500 and 4500 for systems not using IKE, or restrict inbound traffic on those ports to known peer addresses only for systems requiring IKE. Note that mitigations reduce attack surface but do not replace patching. Sources: The Hacker News, Talos, CrowdStrike, Sans ISC, Cyberscoop. Windows TCP/IP Remote Code Execution, CVE 2026-33827. A critical race condition vulnerability in Windows TCP/IP allows unauthenticated remote attackers to execute arbitrary code with a CVSS score of 8.1. An attacker can send specially crafted IP6 packets to Windows nodes with IPsec enabled. Attack complexity is high and requires the attacker to win a race condition and take additional preparatory actions to configure the target environment before exploitation. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates for all Windows systems with IPsec enabled. Prioritize internet-facing systems and those with IP6 enabled. Sources: Talos, CrowdStrike, Sans ISC. Windows Active Directory Remote Code Execution, CVE 2026-33826. A critical improper input validation flaw in Windows Active Directory can result in remote code execution over an adjacent network with a CVSS score of 8.0. Successful exploitation requires an authenticated attacker to send specially crafted RPC calls to an RPC host. The attacker must be in the same restricted Active Directory domain as the target system. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates to all domain controllers and Active Directory infrastructure. Prioritize this patch for segmented or multi-domain environments where lateral movement is a concern. Sources: Talos Sanzisk. CIS adds legacy Microsoft Office RCE to KEV catalog. CVE 2009-0238. CIS added CVE 2009-0238, a 15-year-old Microsoft Office remote code execution vulnerability, to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog based on evidence of active exploitation. The vulnerability has a CVSS EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system, score of 0.572, 98th percentile, indicating high probability of exploitation. Federal agencies must remediate by April 28, 2026. Action: identify and patch or decommission any systems still running Office versions from 2009 or earlier. CIS a KEV deadline April 28. Source: CISA. Next section: business and infrastructure threats. CPUZ watering hole attack delivered signed malware for 19 hours on April 9, 2026, the official CPUZ.com website was compromised at the API level and actively served malware through its official download button for approximately 19 hours. Attackers redirected legitimate download requests to attacker-controlled infrastructure that served properly signed CPUZ binaries with malicious payloads bundled inside. The attack targeted CPUZ, HW Monitor, HW Monitor Pro, and Perf Monitor. Users who downloaded directly from the official site received genuine digitally signed binaries with malicious DLLs. The malware used DLL, Dynamic Link Library, sideloading, malicious crypt base. DLL loaded before legitimate system DLL, reflective PE loading with XXD encryption and deflate decompression, and 3 redundant persistence mechanisms including registry run keys, 68-minute scheduled tasks with 20-year duration, and MS build project files in app data /local. Action: audit systems for CPUZ, HW Monitor, HW Monitor Pro, and Perf Monitor downloads from April 9, 2026. Hunt for suspicious crypt base. DLL files and application directories, registry run keys pointing to system monitoring tools, scheduled tasks with extended durations, 68-minute intervals, multi-year durations, and MS build project files in user app data /local directories. Sentinel-1 EDR autonomously blocked this attack based on behavioral detection. Source: Sentinel-1. Next section: ransomware and extortion. Ransomware Gang Zero APT threatens rival group Crybit. Ransomware Group Zero APT published a leak blog post threatening to expose identities, photos, names, and locations of people affiliated with rival ransomware gang Crybit, unless payment is made. Zero APT leaked a sample of allegedly stolen Crybit data, including plaintext credentials belonging to Crybit operators and affiliates, 5 cryptocurrency wallet addresses, and no evidence of a single paid ransom. Crybit's website is currently down, replaced by an apology message. Zero APT launched in January 2026 and posted hundreds of victim claims in its first 48 hours, likely including inflated claims. Crybit has only been active for a few weeks with no major threat intelligence coverage. Action: monitor for Zero APT and Crybit activity. Criminal-on-criminal attacks suggest internal instability that may lead to operational security failures or data leaks containing victim information. Previous gang conflicts, Dragon Force vs Blacklock, Mamona, and Ransom Hub, resulted in exposure of victim data and internal communications. Source: The Register. Next section: patch priority. SharePoint Server. CVE 2026-32201 actively exploited. CIS a KEV deadline April 28. Microsoft Defender. CVE 2026-33825 publicly disclosed with proof of concept exploit. Auto updates to platform version 4.18.26050.3011. Windows IKE. CVE 2026-33824 critical RCE, CVSS 9.8, unauthenticated remote code execution. Windows TCP/IP. CVE 2026-33827 critical RCE, CVSS 8.1, race condition in IP6/IPsec. Microsoft Office. 3 critical RCE vulnerabilities, CVE 2026-32190, exploitable via preview pane, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Next section, Vulnerability Disclosures. Microsoft April 2026 Patch Tuesday, 167 vulnerabilities. Microsoft released patches for 167 security vulnerabilities, the second largest Patch Tuesday on record. The release includes 8 critical vulnerabilities, 157 important, 3 moderate, and 1 low severity. Vulnerability breakdown includes 93 elevation of privilege, 57% of total, a new record, 21 information disclosure, 20 remote code execution, 14 security feature bypass, 10 denial of service, and 9 spoofing vulnerabilities. The release also addresses 78 Chromium/Edge vulnerabilities patched earlier this month and 4 non-Microsoft CVEs affecting AMD, CVE 2023-20585, Node, JS, EPSS 0.0 at 13th percentile, Windows Secure Boot, and Git for Windows. 2026 is on track to exceed 1,000 Patch Tuesday CVEs annually. Multiple security researchers noted a significant increase in AI-discovered vulnerabilities, with submission rates tripling at some vulnerability programs. Microsoft credited 1 vulnerability to an Anthropic researcher using Claude and 3 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: deploy April 2026 patches across all Windows environments. Prioritize SharePoint, CVE 2026-32201 under Exploitation, Defender, Public Exploit, Windows IKE, Windows TCP/IP, Windows Active Directory, and Microsoft Office. Test Office patches in preview pane scenarios. Update Git for Windows to address NTLM hash leak via malicious repository clone, and 8 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Sources: The Hacker News, Talos Bleeping Computer Krebs on Security CrowdStrike, CIS a Cyberscoop Sans, ISC The Register. Microsoft Office Remote Code Execution Vulnerabilities. Microsoft patched 3 critical remote code execution vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office with CVSS scores of 7, 8 to 8.8. CVE 2026-32190 affects Microsoft Office, affects Word, and affects Word. All 3 are use-after-free or untrusted pointer dereference vulnerabilities exploitable via malicious documents. Remote attackers can execute code locally by tricking users into opening crafted files. These vulnerabilities can be triggered via the preview pane in some configurations, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: deploy April 2026 Office patches immediately. Disable preview pane in Outlook if immediate patching is not possible. Train users not to open unsolicited attachments. Sources: Talos Bleeping Computer Sans, ISC. Remote Desktop Client RCE, CVE 2026-32157, a critical use-after-free vulnerability in Remote Desktop Client, allows unauthenticated remote attackers to execute arbitrary code with a CVSS score of 8. Attack requires an authorized user on the client to connect to a malicious RDP server. Connections may be initiated by clicking on RDP, links in web pages or documents. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates to all systems using Remote Desktop Client. Train users not to click RDP, links from untrusted sources. Block RDP, protocol handlers in web browsers if not required. Sources: Talos CrowdStrike Sans, ISC. NET Framework Denial of Service, CVE 2026-23666, Microsoft patched a critical denial of service vulnerability in NET Framework. Successful exploitation allows attackers to deny service over the network. Microsoft rated this critical despite it being only a denial of service vulnerability. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates to all systems running NET Framework. Prioritize public-facing web applications and services. Sources: Talos Sans ISC. Git for Windows NTLM hash leak, CVE 2026-32631. A vulnerability in Git for Windows allows attackers to obtain a user's NTLM hash by tricking them into cloning a malicious repository or checking out a malicious branch that accesses an attacker-controlled server. By default, NTLM authentication does not require user interaction. Visual Studio updates incorporate Git updates addressing this vulnerability. Action: update Git for Windows and Visual Studio to latest versions. Audit Git clone operations for unexpected authentication prompts or connections to unknown servers. Disable NTLM authentication where not required. Sources: The Hacker News, MSRC. Next section, Windows/AD Security. Windows Server Update Service Tampering Vulnerability, CVE 2026-26150 for Microsoft patched an improper input validation vulnerability in Windows Server Update Service, WSUS, that allows unauthorized attackers to perform tampering over a network. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates to all WSUS servers. WSUS is a critical infrastructure component for patch management and should be prioritized. Source: MSRC. SharePoint Server Spoofing Vulnerability, CVE 2026-20945. Microsoft patched a second SharePoint Server Spoofing vulnerability, in addition to actively exploited CVE 2026-32201. Is a cross-site scripting flaw in SharePoint that allows authorized attackers to perform spoofing over a network. This is distinct from the actively exploited and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: apply April 2026 Patch Tuesday updates to all SharePoint server deployments. Source: MSRC. Node: JSTLS Denial of Service, CVE 2026-21637, a vulnerability in Node. JSTLS error handling allows remote attackers to crash or exhaust resources of a TLS server when PSK callback or Alpin callback are in use. Synchronous exceptions thrown during these callbacks bypass standard TLS error handling paths, TLS client error and error, causing either immediate process termination or silent file descriptor leaks leading to denial of service. EPSS score is 0. 0 at the 13th percentile. Action: update Node. JS to patched versions. Review applications using TLS with PSK callback or Alpin callback for proper error handling. Sources: The Hacker News, MSRC. Windows 11 and Windows 10 cumulative updates released. Microsoft released Windows 11 kilobytes 5,083,769 and KB 5,082,052 for versions 25H2/24H2 and 23H2, and Windows 10 kilobytes 5,082,200 extended security update. Windows 11 updates include Smart App Control, can now be modified without clean install, narrator integration with Copilot for image descriptions on Copilot Plus PCs, improved account settings and about page design, and File Explorer reliability improvements. Windows 10 kilobytes 5,082,200 includes remote desktop protocol file phishing protections, new Windows security indicators for secure boot certificate rollout status, and a fix for BitLocker recovery screen issues on Intel devices with connected standby. Windows 10 build 19,045. 7,184, Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC 2021, build 19,044. 7,184, Windows 11 25H2, build 26,200. 8,246, Windows 11 24H2, build 26,100. 8,246, Windows 11 23H2, build 22,631. 6,936. Action: deploy April 2026 cumulative updates to all Windows 10 and Windows 11 systems. Test BitLocker recovery scenarios on Intel systems with connected standby. Review new RDP file phishing protections and train users on security warnings when opening RDP files. Sources: Bleeping Computer Windows 11, Bleeping Computer Windows 10. Next section, General Security News. OpenAI launches GPT-5. For cyber for security teams, OpenAI unveiled GPT-5. For cyber, a variant of GPT-5. For optimized for defensive cybersecurity use cases. The company is expanding its trusted access for cyber, TAC, program to thousands of authenticated individual defenders and hundreds of teams. OpenAI's Codex Security Application Security Agent has contributed to over 3,000 critical and high-fixed vulnerabilities. The launch follows Anthropic's Mythos preview as part of Project Glasswing. OpenAI's limited release aims to democratize access while minimizing misuse and strengthening safeguards against jailbreaks and adversarial prompt injections. Source: The Hacker News. Google adds Rust-based DNS parser to Pixel 10 modem. Google integrated a Rust-based DNS parser into Pixel 10 modem firmware to mitigate memory safety vulnerabilities. The Rust implementation uses the Hickory Proto Crate with modifications for bare metal and embedded environments. Google chose DNS protocol for Rust implementation because it underpins modern cellular communications and vulnerabilities can expose users to attacks, as in CVE 2024-27227, EPSS 0.1 at 21st percentile. The Rust Crate introduced over 30 dependencies managed using custom Cargo tool. Pixel 10 is the first Pixel device to integrate memory-safe language into its modem. Source: The Hacker News. Adobe Reader 0-Day actively exploited since November 2025, and Adobe Reader 0-Day vulnerability. CVE 2026-34621. Patched in an emergency update on April 11, has been actively exploited since at least November 2025. The vulnerability is added to CIS a KEV catalog with a federal remediation deadline of April 27, 2026, and has an EPSS score of 0.61 at the 91st percentile. Action: verify all systems have Adobe Reader/Acrobat updates from April 11, 2026 or later. CIS a KEV deadline April 27. Source: Krebs on security. Google Chrome 0-Day. CVE 2026-5281. Google Chrome fixed its fourth 0-Day of 2026. CVE 2026-5281. A high-severity flaw added to CIS a KEV catalog with a federal remediation deadline of April 15, 2026. The vulnerability has an EPSS score of 0.33 at the 87th percentile. Action: completely close and restart Google Chrome to ensure updates are installed. Verify Chrome version is current. CIS a KEV deadline April 15. Today. Source: Krebs on security. Fortinet 40 client EMS critical vulnerability. CVE 2026-35616. Fortinet patched a critical 40 client enterprise management server (EMS) vulnerability. CVE 2026-35616 that is actively exploited. The vulnerability is added to CIS a KEV catalog with a federal remediation deadline of April 9, 2026, past due, and has an EPSS score of 0.253 at the 96th percentile. Action: verify all 40 client EMS systems are patched immediately. This is under active exploitation and the CIS a KEV deadline has passed. Source: Bleeping Computer. ICS Industrial Control Systems patch Tuesday. 8 industrial vendors release update. Siemens, Schneider Electric, Aviva, Rockwell Automation, AB, Phoenix Contact, Mitsubishi Electric, and Moxa published new security advisories and patches for industrial control systems. Action: review vendor advisories for affected ICS/SCADA systems and deploy patches according to change control procedures. Source: Security Week. California Cybersecurity Audit Rule. Now, in effect, California Privacy Protection Agency's Cybersecurity Audit Rule went into effect January 1, 2026, requiring certain businesses to conduct annual cybersecurity audits covering 18 technical and organizational components. Covered entities must submit written certification annually that they completed an audit meeting the rule's standards. The audit report does not need to be filed, but will likely become a focal point of plaintiffs' discovery requests in data breach class actions seeking to prove negligence or violations of state data privacy laws. Action: if your organization operates in California and is subject to CPPA regulations, review audit requirements and implement annual cybersecurity audit program. Consult legal counsel on discovery implications in the event of a data breach. Source: Data Breaches. Net. Next section: Trends and Context. This month's Patch Tuesday marks the second largest release on record at 167 CVEs, driven by a surge in AI-discovered vulnerabilities, with submission rates tripling at some vulnerability programs. Elevation of privilege bugs now account for 57% of patches, a new record, while remote code execution vulnerabilities dropped to just 12%. The pattern reflects attackers and AI tools focusing on post-compromise escalation rather than initial access. The CPU-Z supply chain attack demonstrates that signed binaries from official sources are no longer sufficient trust indicators, requiring behavioral detection to catch malicious activity regardless of code signing. The ransomware ecosystem continues to cannibalize itself with zero APT threatening rival gang Crybit, suggesting operational instability that may lead to data leaks exposing victim information. That concludes today's Cyber Threat Brief. From Carolina Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.